Thank you. It's not so easy to visualize the Ordovician radiation of reefs. So I chose two pictures. This is the first. This is a look on the top of stromatolites from the Hoyt Formation, which is latest Cambrian, a quite famous place in upstate New York, natural history place for tourist place. And I chose this picture because in a way it might resemble a little bit like a stack of moldy cheese, camembert cheese. And this is something before the radiation, microbial things. And this is now also a top view on a reef, which is approximately 30 million years younger. Middle Ordovician, also Laurentia, a little bit farther north in Quebec. And when we look at this, you may see, whoops, how does it work? So this way, you may, it doesn't work. This way. Yeah, you may see here bryozoans, sponges, lots of things inside, brachiopods, all kinds of things, and you might compare this with the frutti di mare pizza. So it's much more diverse. So lots of more taxa, higher density of different metazoans, but a different way to visualize this or to bring it in a diagrammatic way was this. I like it. This way, and this is the timeline of the Ordovician, and we see here the Cambrian Ordovician, and these are the reefs in the latest Cambrian, and the blue colors and the green colors show blue colors microbial stromatolites and thrombolites and sponges, sometimes a few sponges in these reefs, and then in the early Ordovician something happens. We have a few reefs with bryozoans and with echinoderms, but during the middle Ordovician there was really a big event, and after the middle Ordovician we have really diverse and in many places metazoan reefs, which are dominated by metazoans like bryozoans, stromatoporides, and corals, which are the most important. And that's the topic of my talk. And the question when I saw this a few years ago, when it came out, this picture was for me, and it was not so explained in that talk. In that paper, what is the mechanism behind that? What were the processes? Why and how did this change in the middle Ordovician? And it is an important aspect of the Ordovician radiation, or the Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event, the GOBI, and that's why I think it has further implications. And the question was, what is going on there? And during the last years, I looked at many places in North America, especially in the reefs here in the Chazy, classic Middle Ordovician reefs of the Chazy group, then the Mingan Islands in the St. Lawrence Bay, and in northern Estonia, the Porkuni reefs and Vasalema reefs. And the stratigraphy of these reefs is Middle Ordovician, late Ordovician, and latest Ordovician in the Hernantian, almost close to the end Ordovician extinction event. Just a few examples. Field pictures, not so beautifully exposed, the Chazy reefs, overgrown, difficult to see, badly weathered often. But I hope I can show some features. These reefs are small. This is a meter maybe, or less than half a meter maybe. In high energy environment, quinate limestones here, and you see these little reef things here, and this is a stromatoporide reef, quite famous in the Fisk quarry, Isle La Motte in Vermont. And when we look at the thin sections, we see something like that. We have stromatoporoid layers, and layers of bryozoans. And these bryozoans, in this case, grew downward. And we also have bioturbated mud and wacky stones, and palaeoidal mudstones and wacky stones, and we have these grove cavities. So we have three things here. We have these layered things, and then the other important thing is these are networks of, or the fenestral. In this case, we have here a fenestral mudstone. And when we go to the Mingran reefs, Darivillian in age, a little bit farther north, this is also these reefs are a little bit larger. They are like a few meters in diameter and maybe 2 meters thick, and often form these cauliflower structures. And this is really a thick reef, part of the reef, and you see here the downward growth of a mixture of sheet-like corals and bryozoans. And this is what we can see often in these reefs, the interconnected sheet-like growth, and lots, especially in the cores of the reef, they are really mud-rich, and sometimes you would even say they are mud mounds, so the mud is often 50% or 60%. And thin section look like that. Again, we have the sheet-like organisms, in this case bryozoans here and corals here, and you see again these grove cavities here and grove cavities here, and then it's a little bit difficult to see, maybe here the bioturbated limestone, and then here a mudstone with how can I say it, a sponge spicules in situ. So sponges were always common. And paleoidal limestone, some paleoidal mudstone, sometimes it wraps. That's better to see in another picture. We switched to the Vasalemma reefs in northern Estonia, a little bit younger. Again, now we are in the Sandbien. And outcrop pictures, they are very nice exposed, and especially when they are weathered, you see all the different structures. Here you see part of a core of a reef, this muddy limestone, and this darker part are crinoid limestone, the talus, and when you have a closer look at these reef cores, then you see again these cauliflower-like structures, lots of layers of bryozoans here, sheet-like bryozoans. Sometimes they are silicified. And thin section, again, you see the layers here, and again, I chose 3 times when the bryozoans go downward. But the interesting thing is to see here, you see again the growth cavities, and the mudstone or wacky stone wraps around these skeletons. Yeah, and sometimes you see it very nicely. There are different colors, and you see these fenestral parts often in the mudstones, and often the fenestra have flat tops, flat bases, and rugged tops. And the Porcuni reef, I like this outcrop very much, although it doesn't look on the picture very nice. The fossils are pristine that you can find in the area, but in these reefs you don't see much when you're in the outcrop, and they look like mudstone, like there's nothing to see. And they were never really in detail described in the literature, and the thin sections are really, really interesting, because when you do thin sections, you see again these sheets of very thin sheets of bryozoans that form here, and which grow in layers. And again, you see the growth cavities, and then here stromatoporoids, the same. And you see in these limestone mudstones, you see again the cavities here, and this pattern, you would say it's a polymud pattern, often dark clotted limestones, and different generations of early lithified limestone mud here. And so when we summarize these 4 examples we would say we always have in these reefs layered skeletons, sheet-like skeletons of stromatoporoids, often bryozoans or corals. And we have these mudstones, and these mudstones always have a real important microbial component in it. So it's always a microbial part in it. So microbes were an important part of that story for the early lithification of these limestones. And now we can come back to this picture. And now this picture makes a little bit, it was not explicitly mentioned in that paper from 2011, but when we now look at these pictures here, we see these nice layered structures of the stromatoporoids or bryozoans or whatever they are. And actually, when you review the literature, you see that these types of reefs are really common and widespread in many Ordovician places, and not only in Ordovician places, but in Silurian and in Devonian reefs. So this was something that was established during the Middle Ordovician and became a dominant mode of reef forming during the late Ordovician. And this is a picture from the Canning. We saw, I think it was down already, a picture from the Canning reefs from the Middle Devonian, and it depicts the stromatoporoid growth. Again, we have the sediment, we have the growth cavities, but we don't see the microbial component here. And I think that's something new, that we have to look at the microbial component here. And this mode of growth was seen in many, many places of Paleozoic reefs, and it was called by one famous Baltic geologist, Valda Janosson. He saw it in many Silurian reefs, and he termed this mode of growth ambitopic mode of growth. So it starts, these organisms start growing on a hard surface, and then they take off and grow on soft sediment, and they form like small bioherms. And this type of growth he called ambitopic. And what type of organisms? Oh no, when we play with this a little bit and think about it, we can see this ambitopic growth as a positive feedback mechanism that forms these, by which these reefs are formed. So we have like a hard surface where start of the surface grow, the surface started growing, and then this surface, the skeletal surface, protected the soft sediment. They bound the sediment. It enhanced the biofouling, and biofilms formed below and above dead parts of the skeletons. We saw this, and this caused enhanced early lithification. And on this place, then the next skeleton could grow. So we had a topographic elevation that was, again, better for the next generation of organisms which grew on the top of that. So we had accreted, we had more hard bottom, and we had a topographic elevation. And that eventually led in something like that. If you add a meter scale here, you would have already something like a small reef with cavities. And these reefs were described already in the literature as crust reefs, for bryozone crust reefs, quite famous from late Middle Ordovician and early late Ordovician of North America, from Laurentia. So how are the organisms who built this? And this is just a copy from Wikipedia and websites, and this is from a Nestor page. And we see here, they basically the morphology was the same. So these were polyp-like organisms with these tentacles and so on, and they formed colonies, and these colonies grew in different directions and have colony forms of all kinds. And when we look now in the fossil record, the interesting thing is they are known since a long time, and since already from the Tremodocian. So from that time when the reefs were dominated by these moldy cheeses from the stromatolites. So we have in the tropics in the Tremodocian, in shallow, high energy environments, we have the first bryozoans, we have the first tabulate corals, and we have the first pulchry laminate stromatoporoids. And these corals and bryozoans, the archetypal type of growth was encrusting on a hard surface in a high environment, high energy environment. And this is the coral here on a hard ground, and you can see the coral just started at this elevated place, and then there was a colony growing. And the same here on some acrinoid root, bryozoans start growing down here in that place, in reefs in Vasalemma. And the question is now, when in the Ordovician started these encrusting organisms to build amphitropic growth? So they took off in the soft sediment at some point, and the question is why and when? When did this happen? And when we look at the diversification of these three types of organisms, the stromatoporoids, tabulates, and bryozoans, we see a very interesting pattern. The first appearance in the fossil record was often low in the Tremodocian, maybe they are even older, but they diversified in the Darwinian much later and simultaneously. The diversification curves are very, very similar, and they formed, the tabulates and the stromatoporoids formed the first reefs in that time, and this was the time of really the wide expansion of all the reefs. Okay, and this is the minute. This is the time when I can come to the ecological fitting idea. I think the notion, the idea of the concept of ecological fitting is really interesting because it tells a lot what can happen there. So when you read it, ecological fitting, defined by Janssen in the 1980s, is defined as the process whereby organisms colonize and persist in novel environments, use novel resources, or form novel associations with other species as a result of suites of traits that they carry at the time they encounter the novel condition. So we have these three types of organisms. They all do the same in the late middle Ordovician. They were probably you can compare it like a at the same time they do these things, and at this point I can summarize bryozoans, tabulates, and stromatoporoids formed sheets and acted not only as sediment binders but prompted microbial growth and early lithification. The associations of sheet-forming bryozoans, tabulate, stromatoporoids, and macrobialites were widespread in the late Ordovician but absent in the early Ordovician world. And these sheet-like bryozoans, tabulates, stromatoporoids, like sponges, existed since the earliest Tremodocian time. And this simultaneous expansion of sheet-forming bryozoans, tabulates, and so on can be best explained under the notion of ecological fitting. And the question is now, what was the reason behind that simultaneous ecological fitting? Was it maybe the climate? Was it predation or whatever? And that would be the topic of another talk. Thank you.